There's this question that keeps coming up, especially whenever welfare gets mentioned online, in the news, or in everyday conversation. Why do so many boomers seem to genuinely hate welfare? Not just dislike it, not just want reform, but emotionally react to it like it's some kind of moral failure. And the answer isn't as simple as they are evil or they are selfish, even though that's how it often gets framed. It's deeper than that. It's cultural, it's psychological, and it's tied to a world that doesn't exist anymore. Boomers grew up in a very specific economic environment, and whether they admit it or not, that environment shaped their entire belief system about work, success, and deserving help. For a lot of them, adulthood happened during a time where jobs were stable, housing was affordable relative to income, and wages actually grew alongside productivity. You could leave school, get an entry-level job, and reasonably expect that if you showed up on time, worked hard, and didn't completely self-destruct, you'd eventually be okay. That matters because when life rewards effort consistently, you start to believe effort is the main variable. You start to think outcomes are mostly personal choices. And once that belief hardens, welfare stops looking like a safety net and starts looking like an excuse. From that worldview, welfare isn't seen as help for people who fell through the cracks of a broken system. It's seen as helping people who didn't try hard enough. And once you frame it like that, resentment creeps in fast. Because if you struggled, worked overtime, stayed in a job you hated, or sacrificed parts of your life to stay afloat, the idea that someone else might get support without suffering the same way feels unfair. That's where the bitterness comes from. It's not just about money, it's about validation. It's about wanting your own hardship to mean something. A lot of boomers don't just oppose welfare because of economics, they oppose it because welfare threatens the story they tell themselves about their lives. The story that says, I earned everything I have. I didn't need help. I pushed through. If the system is acknowledged as unfair, if structural disadvantages are taken seriously, then suddenly their success looks less heroic and more circumstantial. And that's uncomfortable. So instead of questioning the system, it's easier to question the people receiving help. There's always the Cold War mentality baked into a lot of boomer thinking. Welfare, in their minds, isn't just assistance, it's dangerously close to socialism. And socialism was drilled into them as the enemy for decades. They were told that government support leads to dependency. Dependency leads to laziness, and laziness leads to societal collapse. Those ideas weren't fringe, they were mainstream. They were repeated by politicians, media, and institutions over and over again until they became instinct. So when a boomer hears welfare, they don't think of a single mum trying to survive, or someone laid off during a recession, or a disabled person struggling with rising costs. They think of an abstract image. Someone taking advantage of the system, someone bludgeoning, someone getting something for nothing. And once that image is fixed in your mind, facts don't matter much anymore. Another huge piece of this is identity. Work wasn't just a way to earn money for boomers. It was a core part of who you were. Your job defined your worth, your masculinity if you were a man, your respectability, your place in society. Being unemployed wasn't just financially stressful, it was shameful. You were expected to keep working no matter how miserable it made you. So when boomers see younger generations questioning work, culture, rejecting burnout, or saying that full-time work doesn't guarantee a decent life anymore, it feels like an attack on their values. Welfare becomes symbolic of that rejection. It represents a world where survival isn't tied exclusively to suffering through a job you hate. And that challenges everything they were taught. There's also a selective memory problem. Many boomers benefited massively from government support. They don't just label it as welfare, cheap public education, subsidised universities, government-backed home loans, infrastructure investment, stable pensions, strong unions, a housing market that didn't treat shelter like a speculative asset. All of that was collective support. But because it was normal at the time, it doesn't register as assistance in their minds. So they'll say, I never took welfare, while ignoring the fact that the entire system was carrying them forward. And then there's the resentment that builds when boomers see younger people struggling in ways they don't recognise. They'll say things like, I worked 2 jobs, or I struggled too, without acknowledging that 2 jobs back then could still pay rent, while 2 jobs now barely cover essentials. They compare effort without comparing conditions. Same inputs, widely different outcomes. That gap creates anger. Because if they admit the game has changed, they'd have to admit that younger generations aren't failing. They are being crushed by costs, instability, and systems that no longer reward effort the way they once did. And again, that undermines the moral clarity of their own story. From a psychological standpoint, welfare becomes a convenient scapegoat. It gives them someone to blame. Instead of blaming corporations, housing speculation, wage stagnation, or political decisions, they can blame the poor. It's simpler. It preserves the belief that the system works and only individuals fail. And there's also fear in it. A lot of boomers are closer to the edge than they want to admit. Retirement isn't always comfortable. Healthcare costs are rising. So the people that are most hostile to welfare are often terrified of needing it themselves. And rather than confronting that vulnerability, they harden against it. They'll say, if I don't need help, no one should. But what they're really saying is, I'm scared of a world where I might. From one's perspective, especially, welfare hatred is often tangled up with pride. Older men were taught that needing help makes you weak, that asking for support means you failed as a provider. So welfare recipients aren't just seen as poor, they are seen as morally deficient. And once that masculinity gets involved, rational discussion disappears fast. This is why debates around welfare are so emotional. They are not actually about budgets. They are about identity, shame, pride, and fear. They are about whose suffering counts and whose doesn't. What makes this even more frustrating is that modern welfare systems aren't generous. They are bureaucratic. They barely keep people afloat. The idea that people are living large on welfare is completely detached from reality. But the myth persists because it serves a psychological purpose. It reassures people that the hierarchy is fair. And here's the real kicker. The world that shaped boomer attitudes no longer exists. Stable jobs are rare. Housing is absurdly expensive. Education is debt-loaded. Casualisation is normal. Automation is outsourcing our constant threats. The safety nets that boomers resent are actually more necessary now than they were when boomers were young. But admitting that would require empathy. It would require acknowledging that younger generations didn't choose this. And for a lot of people, that's harder than staying angry. So when you hear a boomer rant about welfare, what you're really hearing is someone defending a worldview that once made sense, but no longer matches reality. You are hearing fear of losing moral superiority, fear of being wrong, fear that their success wasn't just grit, but timing. This doesn't mean every boomer thinks the same. Plenty get it, plenty support welfare, plenty see the cracks. But the loudest voices are usually the ones clinging hardest to an outdated narrative. And until we stop pretending this is just about laziness or money and start recognizing it is a generational clash between lived realities, the conversation is going to keep going in circles. Welfare isn't about rewarding failure. It's about acknowledging that no system is fair, no economy is stable, and no one is immune to falling through the cracks. And the irony is, the generation most hostile to that idea is the one that benefited the most from collective support. They just never had to call it that. If you want to talk about responsibility, fine, but responsibility cuts both ways. And pretending that suffering is a virtue doesn't make society stronger, it just makes it colder. If this resonated, drop a comment. Let me know if you've had these conversations in real life, or if you've seen this attitude play out in your own family. And if you want more videos breaking down uncomfortable social truths without sugarcoating them, like and subscribe.